Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's class. My name is Birgit Koopsen, and I'm a brand ambassador for Gelli Arts, and I am in the Netherlands. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to do a class about printing on feathers, and not only on feathers, but also with feathers. And before I start the actual printing, I will tell you a little bit about the product that I'm using and about the feathers. So here I have some feathers that are already printed on. And so I'm using acrylic paint to print on my feathers. But you could also use stamping ink, for instance. Although I have to say that a stamping ink does not get picked up as well by the feathers as acrylic paint does. So I prefer to use acrylic paint to print on the feathers. But if you want to print with feathers, then you can also get some really nice results when using stamping inks. But today is all about acrylic paint and stamping on and with feathers. So the feathers I have here, the ones that are printed on, these are bought feathers. They are white, and I have one here, I think this one that I actually found, which was, or maybe this one. This is also not a white one. This one is also one that I found outside. So I have feathers here that I'm going to print on today. And as you can see, I have some white feathers, which you can buy at Michael's, and also you can get them in a variety of colors. But I like to use white feathers and then add my own color. I also have some feathers that I actually found outside. And I have to tell you about the feathers that you can collect outside. In some countries and some states, you're not allowed to collect feathers you find outside in nature. So before you go out and find feathers to print on, you should check if it's even allowed to do that in your country or your state. But to work on it doesn't really matter whether you use the feathers you bought or the feathers you found outside. The only thing is that if you use white feathers, if you use lighter colors like a yellow or pink or a bright orange, that the color stays nicer on a white background than it does on a darker background like this one, because the layer of paint that goes on top of the feather is so thin that if your paint is not completely opaque, you will see the color that's underneath shine through. So then it's nicer to have white feathers to print on. But you can do it either way. So as I said, I'm using acrylic paint to print on and with my feathers. And today I'm using paint from Liquitex, and I'm using paint from Winsor & Newton. And these are both soft body paints that I use for all kinds of gel printing. My favorite paints to do gel printing anyway. And I also use it for printing on feathers. I'm also going to use found objects to create texture and patterns on top of the feathers. And I have a variety here from pill strips to handmade texture plates. This is, for instance, just a piece of cardboard with some buttons adhered to it and some punchinella. This is a hot glue stamp on which I also did a workshop or a class that you can find on the YouTube channel. I have some bubble wrap, some cardboard, some more punchinella, some Lego. This is a texture plate that was made from straws. It's card paper straws that I created it with, and this is also made from paper straws to create little circles, but also striped patterns on top of prints. I'm also going to use the Gelli Arts mini printing tools to create all kinds of stripes in different varieties. And I also have some of my texture blocks here that you can also find an online class on our YouTube channel about how to create these. And so I'm also going to use these to stamp on top of the feathers. So when you start, when you want to print on feathers, you can print with feathers in the same session, because to get a base layer of color on your feather, you're doing exactly the same steps as when you want to print with feathers. So I'm just going to start adding color to feathers, and then at the same time show you how you can print with feathers on paper. And I just have some scrap paper here that I use to clean my brayer. It's just cleanup paper, a couple of sheets that I will print on, because then I can also show you, because I always tell people that I keep my scrap, my cleanup paper to print on top, to show you how I actually do that. So let's just start with adding some color to a couple of feathers. And I have my 8 by 10 inch plate here. So that's this one. And I'm using this one because the feathers are a little bit too big, some of them, to use on the smaller plate. And this is quite a big plate for just one feather. So I will do a couple of feathers at the same time, adding some paint to them before I decorate them. So let's just roll out some paint, and I'm just going to add a couple of colors. And maybe let's do a pink. And I'm just going to use my rubber brayer to roll out the color. I'm just going to roll them out next to each other and just blend them where they touch, so I get even more colors than just the 3 that I added to the plate, because of the mix of colors. Now I'm just going to put the feathers on top, and I don't really know if I use the right word for it, because I don't know the English word, but I am just calling this the spine. And I'm putting the back of the feather up, so I have the least of different heights at the bottom, so it's easier for me to rub the feathers into the paint that's on the plate. Now, because I want to show you how you can use the paint that's left underneath the feather to make a print after you removed the feathers, I'm just going to line up my paper with the paper that's underneath my plate. As you can see, I have a sheet of white paper underneath the plate that is the same size as the paper that I'm going to put on top. And I'm just going to line it up, because then I can make another print in exact the same position, knowing exactly where to put it. So now I have to be very careful with the rubbing, and make sure that I push down the paper in the areas where the spine is. As I said, I don't know if that's the right name for it, but I'm sure you know exactly what I mean with that. I have to make sure that I rub along that spine and push it down into the paint, because otherwise the feather is not going to pick up the paint from the plate in that area. So I'm doing that very carefully. Then I'm going to remove the paper, and it might pick up the feathers too. It does, as you can see. Now I'm just going to remove the feathers from my paper and then put the paper back in the same position. And as I lined it up to do the first print, I know exactly where it has to go. And if the paint that was underneath the feathers is still wet, it will be now picked up on the paper with the texture of the feather in there. Well, it was almost dry, so it picked up only a tiny little bit, but you can see a little bit here. I'm just going to do another one with a darker color and a little bit more paint to get a better result on this. But as you can see, my feathers are really nicely colored. So I really picked up the paint everywhere. There's just a tiny little bit of white here where the paint, where it didn't pick up the paint from the plate, but they are really nicely covered. And I'm just going to put this one aside, and I'm going to do another one with just one feather to show you the what I mean with picking up the paint. So I really like it if you really see this, the shape of the feather with these open areas. So I like to kind of take that a little bit apart to make it look more distressed, not like a perfect feather. And I'm doing that on purpose because I think that looks even better in the print. And now I'm just going to do a darker color. And let me see. A darker green, and I'm just going to roll it out, and I'm going to print on some of my cleanup paper. Maybe just straight on top of this one. So I'm just not going to cover the whole plate because I'm only going to print one feather, and it would be a waste of paint if I fill the entire plate. So I'm just going to do it like this. And I'm actually going to see what happens if I do it on this background. So although I need to rub firmly around that spine, I don't want to wait too long before picking it up because I want that paint to be still wet. And this is still in the right position, so I'm just going to put it back down. This one is nicely covered, as you can see. And here you still can't really see the texture of the feather because of the color that's already underneath. So I'm kind of messing up here, and I'm just going to do another try to show you what I actually mean. So as you can see, even if I do this kind of stuff, I sometimes mess up and don't get exactly what I want and what I'm looking for, which normally goes very smoothly, and now it's just not working So if you are at home and you're not getting the nicest results right away, then don't worry. It happens to all of us, and you just keep trying. I'm just going to try one of my found feathers now. And then I'm just going to print on top of a white sheet of paper instead of a colored sheet of paper, because that should show better what I mean with the texture. And here we go. Now I'm just going to remove the feather. And for some reason, I just can't get it right. And I still can't get it right. I mean, I don't know what's happening here, but no texture at all. So I think it's better if I just start with decorating some feathers here and then try the texture again later. Let me see if I have a sample. I don't think I have a sample here. No, I'm just going to work on these feathers with this color already and decorate them. I think that's better for now. So I want to create some texture on top of this feather, and the best way to do it is to use contrasting colors. So on this lighter one, I'm just going to use darker colors on top, like a pink, for instance. And how about the blue, deep turquoise? There we go. And I'm just randomly going to roll them out because I just want parts of my feather covered, and I'm basically using my gel plate more as a paint palette maybe than to do an entire print in one go. So I can create a texture that I'm going to pick up from the plate, for instance, using my Gelli Arts mini printing tool. So I can make like a wavy texture, and then take my feather and just push it in there and pick up little bits of paint like this. I can also do a little bit on this feather, and I can of course use my fingers to do the rubbing, but I can also put some paper on top and then rub a little bit better. The only thing is, if I put paper on top, I also remove the paint that's around, and I can't use it for another feather then. But look at that pattern, how fun that is on that feather. So let's do a little bit of punchinella, and I'm just going to put the punchinella on top of the paint, and then I'm just going to leave it there while I'm pushing down the feather and picking up the paint from the open areas. There we go. I'm also going to do some pink on the green because I really like the contrasting colors, pink and green together. But I can also use my brayer on top of that punchinella and create little circles and pick those up instead of the filled little circles I have here. I then have these like little open circles. And of course, all of these techniques can also be used on any paper prints. I mean, I'm doing them on feathers now, but you can use them on anything, of course. I'm just going to roll out a little bit more of this color. And then instead of picking up the paint straight from the plate, I'm using the plate as, how would you say it, an ink pad or a paint pad in this matter. So I'm just going to use the texture tool and pick up the paint from the plate and then stamp on top of my feather instead of picking up the paint from the plate. So I'm going to use this now as a stamp instead of a texture tool to create, to pick up the paint straight from the plate. So I need an even surface to print or to stamp on. Of course, you have to keep in mind that you have that spine, that thing there in the middle of the feather, and you can't push the texture tool down as much as you could do it on paper, but it is adding some texture. And let me see, I'm just going to use a clean feather to pick up this color and texture straight from the plate. So you don't have to have a solid color on your feather in your first layer. You can absolutely create texture in your first layer already, as you can see. So I'm wondering, and I've never asked it before, but I was just wondering, are there actually people working with me at the same time? Are there people who have their plate in front of them and are actually now printing on feathers? I'm very curious because I always wonder if people are just watching or also working at the same time. And let me see, I can't see the chat.
So Birgit, one, oh, listen, look at, they're all coming through, but somebody had asked before if what you like to use the feathers for.
So you can do all kinds of things with the feathers. So you could actually frame them if you like. If you are into more different crafts, then you could use them to create dream catchers. I also like to put one or two or three when I decorate a gift. Like I have a gift that's really nicely wrapped and I put some feathers underneath some string or a ribbon on a packaging. You can use them in your art journal. Yeah, basically whatever you want, you can do with the feathers. You can yeah, I think dream catchers are fun to make with the feathers. And yeah, as a gift to give away on your, that's what I do most with my feathers. I put them on a nicely wrapped gift and with some string.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen you do it. It looks so pretty.
It does look pretty. And yeah, so.
Somebody, you saw a lot of people said, yes, they're working on their feathers while
they
you
are
are
working on their feathers. That is fun. I'm just wondering why I can't see the chat, because I would like. Oh, wait a minute. Here the chat is. Yes. Yeah, now I can see the chat. Okay, so I can also try to answer any other questions that pop up if I see them.
Okay, there's one that just said, what type of paper is best for printing with our gel plate?
So not as a scrap paper, but to actually print on when you do printing on paper, right?
Right.
So It really depends on what you want to do with the paper. So you can basically print on any paper. The only thing that we don't recommend at Gelli Arts is printing on photo paper, especially photo paper that has a coating like a gloss coating or a matte coating, because that will stick to the plate and you won't be able to get it off. But other than that, you can actually print on whatever paper you like. So if you are an art journaler, you can print, for instance, on mixed media paper, and then you can use your paper to create pages in your art journal. Or you could print on tissue paper and use your tissue paper as collage material in your art journal. Or you can print on cardstock if you are a card maker, and or you could print on book paper or whatever paper you like. I have a couple of favorites. So I really like to print on just regular copier paper, like just the thinnest copier paper, because that's great collage material if you want to do, for instance, stamping and stamp things that you want to cut out, for instance. Then that's a really fun thing to do. And I also really like to print on a little bit thicker paper. That's the one that Michael's has. It's from the Recollections paper, and it's a card. It's a little bit heavier than copier paper, and this is really nice if you want to make, for instance, your own books or your own art journals. And I really like to print on the thinnest tissue paper that you can find, because if you use tissue paper with a matte medium, for instance, in your art journal, then it totally sinks into the background and you won't even notice that there is tissue paper. So you can do beautiful layering and all kinds of fun stuff with tissue paper. You could also print on watercolor paper. But that depends a little bit on your personal preference, because watercolor paper usually has some kind of a little bit of texture, and you will see the texture in your print. So if you like a little bit distressed look, then you can definitely print on watercolor paper. If you want a smooth surface, then it's better to print on smooth paper like copier paper or a very smooth card. So I hoped that I could pick up the dry paint from the plate with my feathers, which didn't really work. So my feathers are now just yellow and none of the texture is picked up. So I'm just going to clean my plate by picking up the paint that's left on there with some paper, so I can continue printing on my feathers. So I'm just going to add a thin layer, and in this case I'm using white, but I could have picked any color to pick up my the paint from my plate, and that way clean my plate. And if I'm lucky, I even end up with a nice print that I can use as collage material or as a background for one of my art journals. So I'm just going to show you in a minute the print that I just got when I so it actually almost looks like feathers, a tiny little bit, but yeah, fun collage material. So I'm just going to put that one aside. This is the one that I used before when I wanted to try and pick up that texture of the feather, which didn't work. But then I did one or two other prints on top, and I actually really like how this turned out, because you can still see that there's a feather, but there's a lot more going on. And this would be, for me personally, this would be a great base to start an art journal page on. And that's the same with this one. So this one was also just used to pick up the paint around the feather that was on the plate. And I really like how that turned out. But we were here to do some decorations on these feathers. So I'm just going to continue with that. And I think I'm going to use my little texture tool here. And let's see, let's pick a color. How about we try some orange?
So then at the end of all this, we need to save time. So can you show some of your books that you do?
I can definitely show some of the books. I'm not sure if there are feathers in there, but if people don't mind that they don't get to see feathers in my book, then I can definitely show.
Oh, I think they would love to see that. Okay.
Okay, so I'm just pushing in this little texture tool that I created from paper straws. And as you can see, I get a fun striped texture. And I'm just going to put this one on there. And I'm also going to put this one there. And I'm just going to use this pickup paper and add a layer to that one, because it can only get better by adding more layers. So this way I use my cleanup paper, my pickup paper, like a couple of times, adding color and texture to it. And then when I like it the way it is, or when it's completely filled, I put it aside and I use it for all kinds of things. For instance, in my books. So this is becoming quite pretty already. And so you can just continue doing all kinds of layers on top of the feathers until you like what you got. And I'm using my Lego piece here to create some texture and have a first layer on this feather. And let's do a little bit of color, adding some color to this one. And I just like to go back and forth between the different feathers. I'm not like working to finish one feather at a time. I just go with the flow and just see what color is on my plate and fits with which feather and the colors that are already on there. So I don't think too much about the colors that I put on my plate. In matters of I have a blue feather and I want to have pink on top, I just add some color to my plate, and then I just see on which feather I can use it. So I just go through the variety of feathers that I have and just go like, oh yeah, I can use a little bit of that color on here. That's a nice color, and maybe some of the lighter green on the darker green. So let's create some texture in there. How about using the pill strip? So the pill strip is actually taking away paint from the areas, from the lower areas, and that will leave some bigger dots behind on the plate. And that only works if you don't use too much paint, because otherwise it can't pick up enough paint, but here it should work.
Birgit, we had a question from Karen. Have you ever stamped right onto the feather? Karen asked.
Yeah, so you can do that, and that's what I tried to show before, and I'm just going to try and show it again. So you can actually use rubber stamps to do so, but I don't have any on hand here. But let's just pretend this is a stamp. I'm just going to pick up paint from the plate and use my plate as a stamp pad. And then I'm just going to print or stamp on top of my feather. The only thing is that you have that spine here in the middle of that feather, and it can be hard to evenly press down your stamp or your texture tool and get enough of the paint transferred to your feather. But as you can see, that does work. Maybe if I showed it with a darker color, it would be more obvious. Let me just use a different color. And also, if you want to use your paint to stamp with, so normally I always say don't use too much paint on your plate, because you get nicer prints if you have less paint. But if you want to use that paint to stamp with, you need a little bit more paint. Otherwise, your texture tool is not going to pick up enough of the paint to then transfer it to the feather. But as you can see, I put my feather on the plate when I did the stamping, because of the uneven surface of the feather. It is easier to get the paint transferred well from the texture tool to the feather if you do it on the gel plate, because it will push the feather down into the plate and then get a more even transfer of the paint than it would on a hard surface like my table. Because I can show you, if I try to do it on the table, it will probably not work as well. As you can see, it doesn't work as well because of the uneven surface of the feather. So if you put it on the plate, because it's flexible, it's like with the stamping foam underneath your paper. When you do stamping, then you get a much better transfer here. And then, of course, I still have some paint here that I can use and pick up. And maybe I can also pick up some of this paint. And I don't need everything to be perfect, all of the paint that I pick up, because I can just continue working until I'm satisfied with the number of layers that I have on top of my feathers. So if my paint dries and I don't get a really nice print on top of my feather, then I just do another layer on top until I do like what I get. And what I really like to do, and I can show you probably with some of the feathers that I already had done before I started this class. And as you can see, these feathers actually did turn out really nice, better than the ones that I did so far. Although I have to say, this one is getting pretty okay, and this one too. But what I really like to do to add a little bit more color to the feathers is using some Posca markers and do some splattering. And I don't think I've put them on the list for today's supplies, but Michael's has a lot of Posca markers, and if you just put in Posca in the search bar, then you will get all of the different colors. And I don't know if you know Posca markers, but they are acrylic paint markers. And there is just fluid acrylic paint in there. So that works perfect with the acrylic paint that you're using on the feathers. And I just like to shake them. You always have to shake them because if you haven't used them for a while, the fluid and the pigments are not mixed well inside of the pen. So then you could end up with like almost translucent paint what's coming out. So you have to shake the Posca markers to mix the pigments and the fluid. But what I like to do instead of drawing with the Posca markers is use something to hit them. And then I just hit them until the paint comes out. And this is not the right color to show you. For some reason today is not everything is going the way I want it to go, but I hope you at least get the idea. So I hope you can see it now. I hope you can see the little splatters and the contrast they give on the feathers. So Janice says it's real life. Yeah, that's true. But normally everything works out and everything is fine. And today, for some reason, some of the stuff that I want to show you just doesn't work out. But Luann said, asked me to show you some of my books. And I actually have one here that does have feathers inside. So here I have, and this is also a sheet of cleanup paper. And I absolutely did not intend this to happen. I just used a couple of, I had just had a couple of layers while I was printing with feathers, and then this came out, and I just love the color combination and how well you can see that they are actually feathers. And probably if I had intended to get this, I would never have gotten this exactly. So sometimes you just have to be lucky and get something like this. But so this is one of my books, one of my art journals, and this is what I create from, for instance, painted papers and gel printed papers. And when I have a whole stack of papers and even pattern papers from magazines or pattern scrapbook paper, and I just cut them all to size and then bind them together into an accordion book. And I use different types of binding here. So I used what's it called, washi tape to bind pages together, but I also used fabric and did some sewing. And even here I use the actual sewing without any tape or fabric to just sew pages together. And so these are gel prints, and this has been made with the same technique as I just did with the feathers, but then with stamping ink. And then instead of feathers, I used leaves, but you can definitely create something like this using stamping ink and feathers. And so these are all gel prints. And then the books that Luann was referring to, I will just get them real quick. I'll just grab a couple. Just random, because I have loads and loads of these books. But for the people who asked about the paper that's perfect to print on, so this is like a heavy copier paper, and I think this is even the watercolor paper. And you can see what I mentioned before, that the watercolor paper has some kind of texture, which you can see in the prints. That's what you see here, that the paper is not like picking up the paint evenly everywhere. But so these are the books that I create from like A5 sheets of paper that are folded in the middle and then glued together. There are videos about how to make these books on the Gelli Arts YouTube channel. And this is an image transfer created the way I showed in my previous Michael's class. So you can also still find that video about that class, about using a matte medium to do image transfers. I also do a lot of printing on tags, especially when I participate in challenges. For instance, like there is a challenge going on the Gelli Arts Instagram feed this month, and you get like a prompt every day and you can create a print using that prompt. And then if you do something like that and you print on a tag every day, then at the end of the month you can bind the tags together and have a little art journal with a lot of backgrounds in there already. So this is perfect if you are a little bit afraid to start working on a blank page. And so there's already color on there, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but then it's just easier to work on top than when there's nothing there yet. So here, these are all gel prints, and most of these are with some kind of ink, from stamping ink to alcohol ink, all kinds of ink prints. And so I have a lot of these books that I then bind together into art journals.
Okay,
so
somebody asked how you joined the tag book. How was that bound?
Well, what I did here is I have some paper strips. Let me see, maybe I have a couple here that I can actually, yeah, I have some here. And so let's just pretend that these are the tags, right? And then I have a paper strip that has the same length as the tags, and I just fold them in the middle, the paper strips, like this. And then I glue one tag on this side and the other tag on that side. So you have like 2 pages like this that you can open and close. And then I have a whole bunch of these double pages, and I just glue them back to back. So you always have 2 tags glued on top of each other. Maybe you can see it if I put my nail in between here. So these are basically a bunch of these 2-paged folded tags like this. And then at the end, when I have all my tags glued together, I put fabric or what's it called? Bookbinding tape. I don't know if it's called tape, but also you can use physio tape, the one that you use when you go when you do sports and you have like a hurt wrist or something, and you put the tape that you put on there. You can also use it to bind the books. And then when you've put that tape all around, you add a cover and one on the back, so you don't see the tape that's in between here. So that the tape is in between the cover and the first page, basically. And so you can also do that if you want to create books like these and you don't have paper that's big enough to fold. Then you can do that the same way and use that little strip in the middle to join 2 pages together before you glue them back to back. because that's basically what I did with these books too. It's just, the sheets are just folded into half, and then they are glued back to back together. And then also here is the bookbinding tape. I don't know if it's not called tape, but because it's a kind of fabric, but you just put that around the spine, and then you add the covers. So, but there are tutorials on the Gelli Arts YouTube channel on both the block books, the little block books, and the tag books, how I created them. And so you can find step-by-step instructions on how to make them there. But as I said, there is a challenge going on right now on the Gelli Arts Instagram feed. So if you like to join, then you can have a look there. And if you create something for that challenge and you post it, then you can tag us, and we can show you some love. We would love to see what you create. And also, if you created some nice feathers today, and I hope you did better than I did, then I hope you will share on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever social media you are on, because Gelli Arts is on all of the different social media, and we will find you. Just tag us and Michael Stores, and so we can look up what you created today and with your gel plate. Let me see, there is, what's the best glue to glue down feathers in a journal? Well, that's a little bit tricky because they are not flat, and it's quite hard to actually glue them down unless you use something like a hot glue, but you have to be careful not to use too much, because then it will just soak through the feather. A fun way to apply them in your art journal is sew them in. You can just put like an embroidery thread, and then just go over the spine here and there, and then you can put them in your journal. Actually, I have a journal where let me see if I can find it, where I actually used the feathers in my, so here I have some feathers, and I used staples here. So and there's some kind of tape. I use some tape to apply it here, and then here I use the staple, I don't know if you can see it, to keep it in place. So this is a sample of the feathers used in one of my art journals. Let me see. Hockey stick tape works too, exactly, and the same that you put around a tennis racket, for instance. So the sports tape, that is also a great way to bind the books. And then somebody says, trim scraps from Etsy, beautiful silk. Yes, that would be really nice too. A silicone basting brush to splatter. I don't know what a silicone basting brush is. Is that something you use for cooking?
Yes, it's like, but it's made of silicone, and it has little bristles kind of, but they're thicker because it's silicone. So, and they're floppy. So I think it could work too. Yeah.
Yeah, great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Toothbrush, yes, absolutely. Okay. Okay. Patricia says that the feathers are terrific. Well, thank you so much, Patricia. I know they are not. I don't think I had my best day today, but I hope you enjoyed this session anyway, and it inspired you to create your own beautiful feathers and do something fun with them. And as I said, please tag us. We would love to see, and hopefully I will see you again for my next class next month. And for today, I hope you have a wonderful day, and see you again soon. Bye. Bye-bye.